Welcome back to the Jungle Fever podcast. I'm Ethan Sargent. Abe Crowley's here alongside me. We're in the doldrums of the offseason now. And I think it's funny, like looking back to where it was last year, right? Because last year we were on every week because there was something to talk about every week between Shamar and Trey and everything else. Yes, there was a lot of
Thank
noise,
goodness we don't have to do that anymore.
chaos, calmer, a little bit less noise, and if there is noise, it's positive noise as of right now for the Cincinnati Bengals, as we're actually just about a month, actually exactly a month away as we record this today on Monday, June 29th, a month away from training camp starting. Training camp first day, or actually, I think the first public training camp day is the 29th of July. They'll be obviously in the building long before then, but it'll be fun to see what's going to go. So I think that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about today is some stuff to look out for as we look into camp. I think we'll save some of our battles and stuff like that for some episodes coming up over the next couple weeks. But we'll talk about some initial thoughts and looks as we head into training camp. We're going to talk about some teases by the Bengals media team. Could be some fun new looks on the way for the Bengals this year. We'll talk about that. I think that where I want to start, we might have mentioned this a little bit in our last episode a couple weeks ago, but I want to say it again. Joe Burrow at his press conference that we did discuss in our last episode said that he wants the attention to be on the Cincinnati Bengals this year. And I think we talked about this again last week. Joe Burrow is very deliberate in what he says and his actions, right? We talked about the LSU quote that he made that obviously a lot of talk shows and, your first takes and all those, people were going nuts about that quote because, again, I think Joe knows exactly what he's saying and he doesn't just like, again, he's not the type of guy to just say something. He has to believe something that he says it. And everybody laughed at him back in 2019 when he said that LSU offense was going to average 48 points per game, and they actually went and averaged more than that over the course of that
Yeah.
legendary 2019 season.
You
So
think about where that LSU historically before that season, I mean, they've been competitive, but
I mean, it had been, they won the national title in the 2000s. They had made it to a couple national championships. They went to national. They won the national title in 2007.
they
They
completely
lost
changed
one in
their
09. Yeah.
dynamic. Like they were ground and pound. That was like their identity. And then Burrow comes in, it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, we're just gonna
It was
chuck.
defense first, right? And this isn't a slight on what was a really good LSU defense that year too. Don't get me wrong. That defense was full of NFL guys as well. But I mean that offense is it's just a pick, right? It's the reason why that team is so legendary now, not just because of the success that they had in the stripes of LSU, but now you look at two of the best players on that offense have been major successes for the Bengals, and then obviously you bring in Justin Jefferson, who was a stud for the Vikings, and he's racking up the career accolades. There's Lloyd Cushenberry, the center, is a multi-time contract extension player now for I believe the Broncos and the Titans. A bunch of the other guys on that line have gotten extensions. Heck, even Thad Moss had a little run there in the league for the Bengals. So, there have been spots at all times for that team, and that team is absolutely legendary. And if the Bengals can emulate even a quarter of that team, they're going to be a pretty good football team this year. But obviously, the Bengals are working on that as we speak. So let's focus a little bit on what we're looking at here in training camp. Aiden, I'm kind of this is a little bit of an open-ended episode just because, again, the nice thing is that there's no breaking monster stories. And I'm actually going to pause myself there because I think there is one kind of little story we should start off today's episode with. And we touched on it a little bit last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, but let's touch on it again. It seems like from the social media rumblings and the conversations around the league that DJ Turner is inching closer to some fresh new dough in Cincinnati. Aiden, what have you been hearing? And what's the kind of vibe that you're seeing? It seemed like seemingly positive social media posts right now across Bengals verse, I should say.
Yeah, I don't think it takes an expert to kind of pick up what these two are putting down. When I say these two, I mean, of course, DJ Turner and his agent. If you haven't seen already, DJ Turner has a post on Instagram that has Tom from Tom and Jerry, where he has a fat stack of money and he's on the phone. So DJ Turner's agent reposted it on his story And with a simple couple captions, it says CB1 calculated soon, and then tags DJ Turner. It doesn't take a social media expert, a meme expert, whatever, to understand what he's
The
putting
world of the
down.
modern, it's the world of the modern NFL, right? That's not even, you don't get you don't get posts like from Rappaport now. It's just like, all right, these players are posting their lives essentially on Instagram or Twitter,
Right.
right? And it's,
But it seems like it's going to happen soon, obviously, by the soon. And if you take his word for the caption, it seems like he's going to be paid at a CB1 level, which I absolutely think he deserves. Now we have about a month before training camp. You'd like to hope that it's done before then. So maybe in the next couple weeks, we could see it get across the finish line. But it seems like they're relatively close. And this made the most sense. We've been talking about the guys who are eligible for extensions between Murphy, Turner, and Hill, and it felt like Turner was just the easiest one, just given the level that he played at last year. I know he didn't necessarily get the accolades that a lot of Bengals fans and I personally think he deserved, because his defense was so historically bad, but he played at an all pro level last year. There's just no doubt about it. You can look at the analytics and what he was able to do. So hopefully by training camp or maybe in the next couple weeks, that's what we're talking about. But that seems to be the kind of trek that they're on right now, which is positive for sure.
yeah, you're probably peeking my eyes. I got a nice little dual screen set up here now that I'm back home in New York, and I'm perusing the cornerback contract list at the moment to kind of see where maybe the Bengals could be looking to target, just in terms of comparable salaries, right? Let's preface this conversation by saying this. The top five highest paid cornerbacks in the NFL right now in terms of average annual value. Trent McDuffie, who just got that big money extension post trade from Kansas City in LA at $31 million dollars a year. You've got Sauce Gardner in Indianapolis, who's making $30 million dollars a year. Same with Derek Stingley Jr. over in Houston. And then you've got J.C. Horn, who comes in that he just got extended last offseason, $25 million dollars. You get into that next kind of tier here. And then you get Jalen Ramsey, who is still making a whole lot of money at 32 years old, with he had 24.1
Shout out
million.
his agent, man. Shout out
Yeah,
his
his agent does. His agent is a smart man. Let me tell you that. So when you look at that list, I don't see DJ Turner. He's definitely not going to be in that first tier. I think he'll even be a little bit below that top five tier. Now, I am kind of looking at this middle tier, this kind of top 10 to 15-ish cornerback market. I think that that's the middle sort of ground that the Bengals and DJ Turner are going to look to find. I think a comparable contract is maybe a similar contract to the one that let me try and look for a player like the one that Paulson Adebo just got in free agency for the Giants, and maybe add some more M's to the back of this deal. Paulson Adebo is at a $54 million 3-year extension, right? I think the Bengals will maybe look for that fourth year and maybe beef the annual value a little bit. You know how the Bengals like to structure contracts. You know how they don't like to do it the usual way, right? You saw it with the free agent contracts they handed out to, Boye Mafe and Brian Cook, where they're not those typically, at least now, typically backloaded contracts where you kind of shove the the cost down the road a little bit. The Bengals are, and there's a reason why the Bengals are consistently in the bottom five to bottom one of the league in dead cap. They don't do that, right? And
yeah.
there are positives and there are negatives to that. And I don't think that the Bengals are going to break their structure here. I think that if I had to ballpark what this would look like now, I would, if they're going to do 4 years, I would say 4 years, I'm going to say $82 million over 4 years. I think that kind of puts him right above, that kind of puts him right in line with what AJ Terrell is making in Atlanta. And I think that's a comparable contract, right? AJ Terrell's obviously much young or much older than is Turner 24, 25 years old. Again, he's going to be making for a guy who's,
25.
again, that's still relatively young, right? He's still very much, you could make the argument he's probably just kind of entering his prime now. Uh, it would be wise for the Bengals, I think, to get a deal done in that range because I think that deal's going to pay for itself. If you get that done, like again, a 4 year, 80 million, maybe he only wants the 3 year and you do 3 years, like 60. one, maybe $63 million. You hear me out on that. I think I'd want the fourth year just because of the age and the kind of trajectory that he seems to be on. But Aiden, if you have any thoughts,
Yeah.
I'm interested
Yeah.
to hear what your take would be on that.
I think number one, you can't pay him like one of those top five guys. I think
They can't. It's very true.
respectfully, he hasn't necessarily shown top five upside. He was phenomenal last year, and there's room to grow, but I don't think necessarily you're putting him in that tier of guys. B, you just legitimately can't afford it. You look at 2027 cap hits for these guys. This is where it kind of starts to ramp up, and this is where it gets difficult for the Bengals. Burrow's cap hit is going to be nearly $55 million. Chase is going to be
Even
33
with the
million.
restructure.
He is going to be 30 million. Dexter Lawrence is going to be 25, 24 million. Now, after the Jeffrey Simmons deal, that Dexter Lawrence deal looks like a steal, by the
Looks
way.
real good, don't
Um,
it?
but I think you're slightly underselling it just a hair. I think a guy like Deron Bland for the Cowboys makes a lot of sense for the Bengals. That was 4 years for 90, so about 22 and a half annual. I think in that ballpark. I think I would expect him to get paid like the fourth best player on the team because I, or excuse me, the fifth best player on the team because I think you can make an argument that he's probably the fifth best player on the
Yeah.
team. And so I think that makes a lot of sense around that $22 million range. They just legitimately can't afford to pay him anymore. So I'll be interested to see where
Where the
exactly they
structure is
land.
going to be really important in this
Yes.
deal. I think when you talk about the money, right? They never, when, remember there was all the conversations around the Miles Murphy restructure, and Miles Murphy figures into this as well. Um, where you have the Bengals have three players right now on the defensive side that you have question marks over, or major question marks over the future, right? And they're all guys that have had their ups and their downs in the stripes, right? Turner, we had this conversation, I believe, about a month ago or so on the podcast where we kind of ranked these guys based on how likely they were to or to not re-sign. And the three guys I'm referencing, of course, are Turner, Dax Hill, and Miles Murphy, right? Two guys in the back end and Miles Murphy on the defensive line. You have some really interesting questions to answer. And the most important thing is, right, it does seem like first priority went, and as it should have, first priority went to DJ Turner, right? Great. I think the Bengals will get this one done. Now, the question becomes, what do you do with the other two guys, right? Do you try and somehow, I don't think this is even possible, but do you try and sign them both? I don't think it's possible. I do think you could sign one of those two guys. Now, the question becomes, how do you figure that out? How do you get that done? Another interesting caveat to this, I'm on this page. The highest paid corner on the Bengals roster is currently Dax Hill, who is making $11 million, right, on the
Right.
fifth-year option. That is, I don't, this isn't listed by number, but it is in the middle third of the league. The Bengals don't have a lot of money in the cornerback room right now. You think about every other, I think with the exception of linebacker, it's probably their cheapest room in the building right now. So you got a guy in DJ Turner, right? Who is, I think if I look this up right now, yeah, here he is. DJ Turner is in line to make $6 million this year, or $6 million total. Sorry,
I
on
was gonna
that.
say, yeah, it's about 4 million that he's like
He's making
guaranteed.
about yeah, he's making about $1.5 million this year. And if the Bengals can't figure something out, he'd be an unrestricted free agent next year. And let me tell you, he'd probably, if he plays to his level, he could go out there and make 25 to $28 million on the open market, which is why it would be very wise for the Bengals. And it seems like they're already on top of this. Very wise for them to go out and re-sign a guy. So again, the Bengals, in terms of their guys right now, it's funny actually. Tacario Davis is actually making, as of right now, more money than DJ Turner, just because the value of third-year contracts has gone up, and he was a day two pick, and they're all kind of structured like that. So, yeah, the Bengals have a lot of money in that room right now, and I think they're going to change that here pretty soon with DJ Turner. So keep an eye
You
out
would
for that.
hope. You would hope.
You would think so. You'd hope they get that done. I think the goal is to probably try and have that done in the next month, you would think, so that it doesn't drag on and become a distraction to camp. But we know how this team works. Probably not going to be that simple. So we'll see how that goes. Excited to see DJ Turner get a very, very well-deserved payday. And then I think then you kind of the domino falls and you have the discussion about Murphy and or Hill. Where can you figure out the money? They've already mentioned in press conferences that they have a desire to bring Murphy back. I think you probably there if we're being honest here, I think they're probably trying to get this DJ Turner deal done so they can figure out where the finances are and what they've got left. And because you know how much this team hates going into debt. Has that ever happened?
They have about what 16 million to play with
Yes, right.
this
That
season.
restructure freed up a lot of money that probably paid that restructure probably pays DJ Turner's contract this year. And now it's the rest of that. How do you figure it out? Because again, we know they don't like those backloads. They don't like doing that. So they may have to. That might be something where they might have to get creative if they want to try and retain one of those guys. Because I mean, I think, and we talked about this earlier. I just think Dax is going to be the odd guy out. I just, and
Yeah.
it's nothing against Dax. I hope he plays well this year. I think he's going to be a big part of this defense, but I just don't know if the cash and the flow is there for him to make the
What
money that
happens when you pay Burrow, Chase, and T? I mean, you have to be
sacrifices.
creative. And listen, I will always be on the side of pay those three absolutely whatever they want because they're good enough to go out there and beat whoever you want to line them up against. But this is kind of the back end of it. You have to be smart about how you do it, and that's why I think the Bengals were smart to go out and get a guy with a good value like Decario Davis, who they hope to probably take that CB2 role. Not next year, obviously,
Yeah,
but the following. So
yeah. Similar build as well to Dax Hill. A little bit bigger, of course, but that same kind of range. Um, so let's talk a little bit about some rookies maybe and some guys we're expecting to I guess play some big roles in training camp because it's coming up in a month. Obviously, very productive OTA period for the Bengals. A lot of positivity in the building right now. We've discussed the vibe a lot in the building over the last couple episodes. It's as positive as I can remember a Bengals offseason so far, right? I mean, you think about obviously all the shock waves and the I guess echoing of the Dexter Lawrence trade and bringing him into the building. And I've talked about this already. I just love how involved he is off the jump, right? You have all these Giants fans who are saying like, "Oh, he quit, right? He doesn't want to be." And then you're just seeing the exact opposite of that get enacted right now in Cincinnati. He's taking a front row seat. You see Shamar Stewart talking about learning from Dexter Lawrence. You see some BJ Hill talking about how valuable it is to have a guy like that in the room, right? A guy who he knows well from his time at the Giants. You talk about Miles Murphy saying the same things, right? He's just going to be such a leader of that defense this year, and especially that defensive line in general. That, look, they've got, we love to dog on the guy, but they've got some big shoes to fill in Trey Hendrickson, right? He did a lot for this team over the last few years. He had over 60 career sacks for the Bengals in four in seasons and change. So there is a lot to replicate there. And I think we've already talked about how deep this group is this year, and there's so much potential in this room. Um, they have a lot to work with. Who could step up besides Lawrence to maybe make some plays on that D line? And who are you looking for maybe in camp to maybe try and take those steps to make that happen?
yeah, I think the obvious one has to be Miles Murphy. What does he look like as basically the second option? He's no longer a rotational piece. He's going to be a guy who's going to play a lot alongside Boye Mafe. And then what do you get out of Boye? You're paying him as an edge one. That's what you hope for. Obviously, the counting stats haven't been there, but analytically, he's been dominant. So you hope that that's the case there. It's interesting because that conversation surrounding Dexter, I think there's some legs to the fact that, he became fed up with losing in the Giants
That I'm not
system.
disputing at all.
I think there is absolutely some legs to that conversation, but one of the more telling things for me was not even a month of Dexter Lawrence being here. He was at Miles Murphy's charity event at St. X High School, just taking pictures with high school kids. He's out there in the community and he wants to be involved in it. Like you mentioned, it seemed like it kind of rejuvenated him a little bit. And then he mentioned in his presser as well, when you trade that kind of draft capital, it's a motivation because it's a sign that you believe in them and you want to back that up. And so I think there's some legs to it. But overall, I mean, there's not a lot of like guys I'm looking to take a step on the defensive line. We know who has to do it. It's not,
Yeah.
not a question mark of who, it's if you're going to get it or not.
Well, then you've got the wild card of Cassius Howell. I mean, I think when you look at a guy and you look at how this room is kind of set up, right? And we discussed this all the way back when we were doing our draft talk, but you've got a guy like Cassius Howell who I don't think is going to be asked to play a whole lot of first and second downs, right? I think
Probably
he's
can't.
not going to be on the field on those plays. I'm just going to tell you right off the rip. It's not going to happen. On those third and mediums to third and longs, Coach Montgomery's going to pat his helmet on something and say, "Hey, go get the quarterback." That's going to be his job, right? And yeah, I'm sure they'll come up with great stuff. You know how athletic Cassius Howell is. He could do a lot of different things. But his main job is going to be to go get the quarterback. And I think when you look at what this line can do, and we talked about this again back in our draft talk, but with the amount of mixing and matching that you can do, and the Bengals haven't had a luxury like this in a long time, I think, where you have so much creativity. I can't wait to see what they do against like a Lamar Jackson, right? You know how tough it is to get him down. What can the Bengals do on a 3rd and 7 with Lamar Jackson? You know, if he gets interior pressure out of the pocket, he goes and how threatening he can be in that spot. How will the Bengals counter that? It's all these fun chess matches that you're going to see over the course of the season. And I think the Bengals finally have this is the good alliteration here. They finally have the pieces, right? They don't just have pawns in the middle of that defensive line. They had a couple of pawns in there for a few seasons. They've got a couple of guys now that have hit the end of that chessboard and have gone to a queen, have gone to a rook. I don't know all that much about chess, but I know that much.
You nailed it.
So
You nailed it.
I think that's going to be the fun part about this defense, right? Is being able to just get pressure in creative ways. And Howell's going to be a big part of that. And then again, of course, you got first round pick in there, Shamar Stewart, who is still, I think the Bengals are still kind of working out where he fits best too. There's positives and negatives to that, but whatever. Um,
It'll be refreshing to see interior defensive line pressure in pass.
yes.
That will be refreshing. We haven't had that for 10 years.
Yeah. Yes.
Literally
Since the
10 years.
last big number 97 in Cincinnati, since Geno Atkins was terrorizing people on that ideal. And you think back, because this defensive line kind of reminds me of some of those early 2010s Marvin Lewis lines when you had guys like Carlos Dunlap, of course, but you had like Michael Johnson coming off the edge. You had some of these other like just really good players that were able to make plays. And where did it all start? On the interior with a big number 97, because what Gino was able to do, I mean, he just bullied guards and centers for fun. And it made life so much easier for guys like Carlos Dunlap because, they're getting one-on-ones. They're getting isolated matchups. And that's why, again, it's all going to fit together for me so well. Like, that's what has me so excited about this is I think it's all going to fit together. And Miles Murphy, Mafe, Stewart, whoever else, Howell, whoever else comes off that edge, licking their chops because they're going to get one-on-ones. They're going to get chances against single teams, and there's nothing an edge rusher in the NFL likes more than that. So let's have some fun. I think this D line is going to be as fun as we've seen it in a long time, and Al Golden and Jerry Montgomery are going to cook up some fun stuff this year. I want to stick with the defense real quick because I think there's one more position you have to attack. Oh, two. We don't need to talk a whole lot about linebacker. I think the big thing with linebacker is the trust that they have in the two much maligned guys on the inside in Carter and Knight, right? I think you've seen a lot. There's been a lot of positive talk about those two in particular. I think Carter in particular is getting a lot of backing from a lot of guys in the
I was
building.
gonna say, I don't know if this is a hot take. Don't be shocked if Carter's wearing a C on his chest this season.
Yes, he's getting a lot of positive feedback. A lot of pressers where guys are talking about how vocal he is, how the work ethic has changed, right? And Knight is getting some positive feedback as well. They're betting on growth, right? Yes, everybody and their mother knows that they got thrown into like a scalding hot inferno last year. It wasn't good. It happens. It's in the past. I think now you've got two guys who are going to be super motivated. You know that for sure, right? They understand that they were a problem last year. And I think you wouldn't have to tell them that. They know, right? So I think now you got two guys who are motivated and again, it's an open book, right? I want them to succeed. There will be and they're going to get every ample opportunity to succeed, right? And they've got a lot better pieces around them, better leaders, better everything like that. So over to the back end now, where the safeties, you kind of got your two spots locked down with Battle and Cook. You've got your two outside corners locked down with Dax and DJ. This last spot is kind of up for grabs a little bit at the slot. I think right now, if the Bengals played a game tomorrow, it'd probably be Jalen Davis getting the role out there at a technically CB3, but I call this more of like the nickel back, dime or whatever. Like, it's more that third corner that'll come in on a lot of those plays. Third downs typically. And I think the big thing, right, this is not just Ricardo Davis's spot. I think some Bengals fans are kind of just thinking, oh, well, he's just going to come in and take that spot. Number one, we talked about this a bunch of times. This is just not a role that's cut out for Decario Davis. It's not his. That's not like, can you imagine Decario Davis going up against like some of those shifty slot receivers? That's tough, right? That's not Decario's role. Davis, however, I think has been a really positive success story. Undrafted free agent, has kind of bounced around the league a little bit, and then he's been in Cincinnati. I think for a while. I think he's one of the remaining holdovers from the Super Bowl team. I believe he was on the roster at that point. He's kind of just hung around. He's bided his time. He's waited for his chance, and he's going to get it here in training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's his spot to lose, in my opinion. I think he showed flashes at the end of last year. I think he had some good games in that nickel corner position. And you look at the other guys around, and it's like I don't think that they really push the issue. DJ Ivy's kind of in that Decario Davis situation where like I just don't think his profile fits that kind of position. And then you have guys like maybe Kyle Duggar more as like a Mike Hilton role and like kind of a thumper run fit rather than a coverage guy. And it depends on what you have. And that's where like the creativity comes in for Al Golden. And I think that's why it's such an important year for him because he has a lot of levers that he can pull. It will just be depending on which ones he wants to pick. But it's Jalen Davis's job to lose right now.
It is. And I mean, I'm looking at, I just pulled up the roster real quick, and you're looking at this cornerback room right now, right? You've got Jalen Davis, you got Tacario Davis, you got Dax, DJ Ivy, who again I think will be a part of this conversation in this spot. You got Jalen Kimber, a former undrafted free agent out of Penn State. You got Braylon Lux, who got a lot of special teams reps last year out of Texas Tech. You got Josh Newton, who is another name I think that will be involved in this race. I think it'll be between Newton, Davis, and Ivy. I think right now it's probably reverse order of what I just said. I think probably Davis is the number one right now. If you had to roll out a depth chart tomorrow, and then it would be Ivy, and then it would be Newton. But there's room, right? Plenty, and there are gonna be a lot of opportunities. All those guys are gonna get first team reps throughout camp. There's gonna be chances against as good as weapons as you'll see throughout the season. And then you've got another name to think about is Jasir Taylor as well. They brought him in from and we talked about Kyle Duggar, who's a part of this roster now. Haven't heard a lot about him, but he's there, right? So Duggar and Taylor may fit into this as well. Duggar kind of everywhere, right? Duggar
Like a
might be a part of
linebacker
this as
hybrid
well.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So Duggar will have a role, I think, to play in this equation, but he won't be the starter. And then Taylor may also fit into this, but Taylor, I think, fits in a little bit more better, probably more of like a CB4 kind of on the outside, if Dax or DJ needs a rest. So, yeah, I think this is the room with the most opportunity. I think if you're looking at this defense. And then the nice thing about the offense is there's not a lot of conversations we really have to have.
I was gonna say no, no, no. I was gonna almost completely disagree. I find the offense extremely interesting, and I don't know if we have enough time to unpack this.
Might
But
be that might be next week. That
the
might be next week.
conversation that I think is so interesting with an offense that legitimately you don't have to touch, you don't have to change from last season because guess what? All 11 guys are back. Is how do you get better? The Bengals offense has been extremely, extremely efficient. They've been one of the best in the league, but they haven't necessarily been explosive. And that's been the big conversation this offseason with the Bengals offense is how do they get more explosive? How do they make life just a little bit easier? Yeah, and it is those deep ball threats, but where do those come? It comes from explosive run rate, which they haven't necessarily had. Chase Brown has been extremely efficient, but he hasn't found the big home run plays that you would think from a guy that is analytically as good and profiles in that way, in the way that he's able to make guys miss. And so the biggest conversation for the Bengals this offseason is do they go under center more? Is that something that they try to unpack? And I'm
Mhm.
curious what your take on this because you look at some of the best offensives last year in terms of explosive play rate. It's the
Well,
Patriots, it's the Bills, it's the Packers, it's the
yes.
Rams. What do they have in common? Their under center rate is top 10 in the league, all of them.
Yep. And you want to know where the Bengals under center rate is?
It's 31st.
30. Yeah, I was gonna say it's in the bottom three.
It is
They
31st.
and all of the talk is that Burrow doesn't like going under center, which there may be some truth to that. But if it works, Burrow's gonna do it, right?
Well,
Like,
that's the thing, right?
yeah.
Is because what is Burrow's? Not to cut you off. I'm sorry. I'm just a nerd about
No,
this.
no, go ahead.
What is Burrow's best trait? It's his processing, and he
Mhm.
wants to sit back there and he wants to read everybody and he wants to just take it in and he wants all the responsibility on him. And so if you're Zach Taylor and if you're Dan Pitcher, you don't want to take that superpower away because it legitimately is a superpower. He's the best in the league at it. And then you add that on top of his accuracy. That's why he's as good as he is. You don't want to take that away from him. But at the same time, you want to take some of the burden off of his shoulders a little bit, right? You want to try and make it easier. You want to have a play where, hey, just line up under center and just hand it off to Chase Brown, or maybe play action and then it's a two route concept. You just want to try to simplify it a little bit. So it's this weird dynamic that I think the Bengals are in where they're trying to kind of figure out, do we want to tweak it or do we just want to kind of leave it the same? So I don't know
Yeah.
where you stand
And
on
I
that.
think this is where the fact that Dan Pitcher is still the offensive coordinator, right? We know he had some interest from outside the organization last year to potentially take that role elsewhere. Tampa Bay kind of phoned for him. I think Tampa Bay would have given him play calling responsibility, but he stayed, right? He stayed home in Cincinnati. And I think if this season goes the way it could, if the Bengals do really put it all together and they have a lot of success, there won't be a hotter name on the head coaching market than Dan Pitcher. He will get every first interview, and I think he knows that. I think that's part of the reason why he stayed. I think that he knows that if he doesn't even have to call plays, right? Number one, and I've said this before, Zach Taylor doesn't get enough credit for this offense. And number two, I think if Dan Pitcher if they put together an offense that's, in that top 5 to 7 range or higher this upcoming season, every team's first phone call for head coach next year, right? Typically there's 6 to 8 openings, sometimes more. Every first call will be to him, right? He is going to be the first name on the sheet for every team. So I think that's part of the reason why he stayed. And this offense has so much potential, right? When you think about it, I'm glad you brought it up because I do think those top pieces, that I think this is maybe the way I should have phrased it better. Those top pieces are all set. Sorry, we know who's starting a quarterback. We know who the
All
two.
11 are
Yeah. We
like
know who the line is. We know the two top receivers are going to be, right? There's some competition for some depth receiving spots. There's some competition in the tight end room that I want to get into probably next week. But like there is potential for some of these guys to take huge steps. How about Eric All coming back into the fold, right? A guy who has had numerous knee injuries, but the Bengals absolutely love him and they keep talking about how much he's working and how hard he's grinding and he's working out now. He's back fully in pads, working out. He got the all clear. So again, another piece to
he's
add to
the
the
I
mix.
think he's the key. I think he's the key, which is crazy to say for a guy with an injury history like his, but his ability to be as good in the run game. Like there were times in his rookie season where they lined him up at fullback and they just
Mm.
gave him a head of steam and he would just go down and hit people. But he's also a good enough athlete to be a threat in the pass game. That's just something that the Bengals
We
don't
saw it,
have.
in the brief moments that he had in 2024 before that injury, right? Where
Right.
he had some flashes in the pan, right? Some moments where you're like, hold on a minute. Like, who's this guy? And
Right.
I think this tight end room is really interesting. You got to figure in Jack Endries as well, who could really be a threat in the receiving game. And then obviously you've got a couple other bodies in and around there, and you know what Mike Gesicki's capable of in terms of all that. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to discuss with the offense. We'll
I
save
was
it
gonna
for next
say
week.
it's
There
interesting.
is a lot to unpack there in terms of some of these rookies that are coming in. There's some new faces on the O line that I think could make some big impacts. Some real great depth on this O line, I think, for some of those younger guys. So a lot to discuss there. Last couple minutes. Do the Bengals bring back the leaping tiger in some capacity this year? It
So much
kind of
fun.
seems like
Yes,
they're
yes, yes,
teasing it
yes,
a
yes,
little bit.
yes. My answer is yes.
I hope so. They should.
I don't know if you saw the Bengals had a little
I
tease
did. I saw
said
the
from
little
the
post.
archives, and they're marching out, and they're in their leaping tiger
Riverfront
jersey,
Stadium, right? It's all
Riverfront
the
Stadium. Anthony Munoz is pictured in it as well. It just seems like a lot of that is the tease. You think back to last year, Ocho Cinco's rocking the throwback white with the leaping tiger on the sleeve and the Bengal stripes on the
and
shoulders, and
they do not have because you can have four now. They don't have the fourth, right? They have the three, the normal set, because they got rid of that color rush set from a couple years ago. They do not have a fourth set of uniforms at the moment. I would not be surprised if the Leaping Tiger, the 80s, 90s vibe of the Bengals comes back for a little throwback, because that is a
that's the
clean
trend.
set. It's a
That's
clean
also the
set.
trend in the NFL. Think about the Seahawks and what they just did. Think
Yeah.
about the Titans and what they just did. Like
You
that.
don't even need to mess with the helmet. The helmet can stay exactly the same. And you slap on those throwbacks. I think they'll look great. We'll see if they what color they do them in. If they do them in white or if they do them in black, I think they both would look good. But yeah, always aesthetics. Always aesthetic. Especially with that
They
helmet,
have one
man.
of the
You
best looks in the league. You
can't
add
miss
a
them.
good modern throwback, it's going to make it so much better.
So, well, we got lots to discuss next week. We're going to be busy now. We're starting to ramp it up. We're getting closer and closer. Want to wish everybody a happy July 4th, America 250. Enjoy that with your family and friends around the country, and we will catch you in July. We are 2-ish months away from NFL football. We are getting closer and closer to the Bengals season. We will catch you next week here on the Struggle Food Podcast.